in case.
This is a chat on Saturday, February 18th. Brad and I, we decided to record just in case something interesting happens.
In the offhand possibility. I have three things to talk about with Curt today, and they're related. And I think that I will start with the first one, which is the most juicy, spicy topic, which is this construct of racism, which is quite an interesting thing because it's like this: the accusation by the minority woke activists is that all whites are racist. And I originally thought that to be fallacious, and now I find it to be, I think there's an element of truth within that ambiguous terminology. And so I wish to discuss that because it's like this.
All groups are racist. Whites are the least racist. That does not mean we are not racist. It means we're the least.
All right. But now if I may develop my argument, sir.
Well, that's great.
Oh. Okay, so it goes like this.
I didn't. What did I do wrong?
And I thought you said. I thought you meant something else. My apologies. The issue is this: is the issue is the Northern European population underwent a process that we consider to be genetic pacification, which is elimination of genetic deviants that are misbehavior oriented.
Yep.
And so alone among people on the planet to have done so to the extent that has been accomplished in Western Europe. And so every other population is more wild in that context, less cultivated, and their behaviors are more erratic because of it. In terms of social behaviors are less conformist, anti-normative for Western European standards. Does that make sense?
Hard to say about, yeah. That's generally true.
Right. So they regard our behavioral pacification efforts as racist because there is a genetic component involved.
Right. That's correct. You're right.
That's the issue. So it's not that the terminology is false. It's that it's just excessively ambiguous.
Well, what it is, it's saying that it has to do with their color rather than with the fact that stereotypically people of their color or their background or their phenotype are less likely to demonstrate Western levels of genetic pacification and subsequent high trust. That's just what it is. So we get out of, I was listening to Bill Maher the other day, and I'm like, well, Bill, you're a Jewish guy, right? You think that you're right, but you're actually wrong, right? I mean, and so, that's, Jewish sensibilities, and they just assume they're right. It turns out that they have a very cosmopolitan female frame, which sounds great as long as you can live in a cosmopolitan environment where responsibility is very low. But when you have territorial responsibility like we do, and you still have to maintain high trust, then you end up with more conservative leanings. It's not terribly complicated. The flip it around is, if you live in an urban environment and you're a cosmopolitan people, you can't have responsibility because it's impossible to get responsibility in an urban environment.
Okay, that sounds like Babylon, like an imperial environment.
Well, talk about this. So we think about, we've got, I'm going to use a religious analogy. Can you fucking believe it? All right. We talk about the Tower of Babel, right? Which we know what happened, really. I think it's Sumer. They were trying to convert the pyramid from build the step pyramid or reconstruct it. I don't remember which. And so
Ziggurats.
What?
The ziggurats.
And so they brought in people from all these conquered lands and put them to work together. The problem was they couldn't work. The same thing, I think they've had this, what's the city? Anyway, the amount of inflammation I have in my head this morning is not helping my memory. So the what palace is it? Anyway, so building the ziggurat. Anyway, it turned out to be a management nightmare.
Right.
Right. And so because people do have all sorts of habits, traditions. It's not just the language. It's how they work together.
That's right.
And if you take people from a high trust culture, people from a low trust culture, the people from low trust culture seize opportunities to benefit from the commons that they see as simply natural, whereas high trust people will not seize those opportunities. Just as you say, Europeans, we won't engage in baiting into hazards because we're a high trust people, and we don't even conceive of it. Whereas Jews do, and then Muslims abuse it. So conversely, if you take Asians, they have less responsibility for commons on an individual basis. They're very much like us. That's why Asian white marriage seems to work out pretty well, except that the women are all crazy. Did I say that? I didn't say that.
That requires further discussion.
And I'm not going to talk about funny noises they make in sex that just drive me crazy. I didn't say anything, did I? There was that one copy got talking.
I don't recall hearing anything, sir. I think your microphone may be going.
You have to. I mean, I'm a scientist. I have to research these things. You have to have sex with all the races in order to, and you have to have enough sample data from all the sex from having sex with all the races, so you can do a reasonable comparison.
Otherwise, it's just hearsay.
Otherwise, it's just presumption, right? But if you, I'm a scientist. I had to gather new research.
There you go.
They make funny noises. I don't like it.
All right.
I'm not getting anything out of you. I thought I would get somewhere with that one, but nope.
Sorry, Curt, to disappoint you, sir. So the next thing on the line of discourse potentials is this premise of moral factionalism on the right.
Yes.
Which is cause them to develop a multitude of smaller hierarchies that are independent and somewhat antagonistic to one another, because they believe themselves to be right, and they presume themselves to be right, and they act as though they're right, and it causes the right to be in disunity in the face of leftist unity.
Right. Pax versus herds.
Right. But this all this means is that the right requires a sufficient consciousness of the threat imposed that is sufficiently bad to cause them to overcome their moral indignation with one another to cooperate in conflict with their perceived enemy.
Correct. This is why conservatives only act as a cliff event or a binary switch rather than because
so it's just waiting for the action potential to achieve its goal.
Yeah, because the action potential has to overcome the group differences.
Which is it's really interesting because it's like the moral indignity of working within a hierarchy that it seems alien to you on the right, if you're a person on the right.
Yeah, it's really easy to explain though. Is that what's the feeling you get when you are in a Christian? What is Christian moral intuition feel like? Positive moral intuition. What does constitutionalist, like Constitution as sacred, what does that sort of moral intuition feel like? And in the military tradition, what does that individual feel like? It's actually a dominance expression versus, right? It's conflict. It's conflict expression by different forms of dominance expression. So you have a submissive Christian, a reciprocal libertarian, and a dominant martial. And that's what we get because that's the sex difference spectrum. So we're going to get those things. Now you're going to see that some people some Christians are going to be, some Americans are going to be all three, right? They're going to be Christian, constitutionalist, militarist, which is what we want everybody to be, frankly, right? So the way I questioned this question before is, in politics, are you a Christian first, a libertarian first, or a conservative, martialist first? And of course, I would say I'm a libertarian first, a martialist second, and a Christian third, right? Because that's right. Or I would say I might actually be wrong. It might be I'm a martialist first. Yeah, that's probably right. A martialist first, a libertarian second, and a Christian third, because that's sort of the scale in which things go from top to bottom. But I might be a Christian first, a legalist second, and a martialist third, because I'm sort of on the empathic side of the spectrum, and I see myself at the bottom, right? Right. So it just, we all have these subconscious presumptions of ourself in relation to others. As there's an awful lot of women naturally see themselves lower down, and so they take the submissive position. Some people think they're competent, and so they take the medium position. And some people are dominant; they take the martial perspective. And it's more like, how do you express altruistic punishment? So altruistic punishment among Christians, among libertarians, and among conservatives differs. I mean, conservatives are like, cut their fucking heads off. Libertarians are like, punish them, and Christians are like, they're lost. They need to be ostracized, maybe.
Right.
They need to be disapproved of or ostracized. So this behavior is consistent no matter what we do, right? So, so when you look at that, you're saying, well, of course, if we have in a culture where we allow trifunctionalism, we put a competition between the dominant personality types, which is left, feminine, center, libertarian, right, martial. Of course, you're going to get that, because since personalities cluster in those ranges, you're going to get, they actually cluster at the bottom too, which is sort of neutral, whatever goes. But you have the 4 personality clusters. And so, of course, if you have individualism, sovereignty, trifunctionalism, which allows the development of these competing systems, you're going to get competing systems. You notice you don't get this in Islam or Judaism, because it's a monolinear culture. You don't get it at all. I mean, these things are completely monopoly driven. I could go through each culture, it doesn't matter. The Indians are more like us. The Chinese are more like us. The odd people out of the Semites and the Africans.
Well, see, the interesting function in my mind is that the right has to recognize the conflict as war in order to galvanize unity, and that as long as they think it's civil conflict, that they're going to be excessively fractionated.
Yeah, I was thinking while you were talking there that I was trying to see what's the trigger criteria, and it's like the right is basically functions as white blood cells, right? That's what the right does. They say you have a bigger amygdala or whatever, right? The basic thing is we're more conscious of intertemporal threats, right? And more threats and more intertemporal threats, and even threats to hierarchy, right? That's why people have loyalty, and loyalty is so strong. I'm always surprised that my personality is governed primarily by loyalty.
Yes.
So So if you have like the right, they're the red blood cells. The libertarians of the center is more like they're pragmatic. They want it to be useful, and the Christians want to feel that it's moral or right or just. Right. And you have this spectrum. Now, of course, there's a little bit of this in every one of them because we're all an odd ad mixture, but generally that's the case. So my view is you have to get everybody to their trigger point on their trigger criteria.
Yes.
So libertarians like me, they just want to know people will stop fighting and we can have a better life and we'll be more prosperous, right? Right, if you want to talk about the conservatives, they're very much going to want to punish evil.
Yeah, I know.
Right, they want to
Because
punish
it's like
evil.
there's some joy to punishing bad things.
And the Christians, they want to feel like they were virtuous.
Okay.
Right, I'm trying. Whatever the reason we use ternary logic is to give us a universally consistent framework across all measures. Right, we
That's
know
right.
this is the universal system of ternary logic is the universal system across all measures. Right, it's not fucking complicated. Right, so whenever I try to look at a problem, try to disambiguate it into what's causing this particular issue.
Right.
So in this case, we know what the issue is. We know what the broader issue is: the rise of the feminine in response to the industrial, as an effect of this industrial revolution, and we know that our failure to suppress feminine antisocial behavior is the reason why everything's sort of going sideways. That said, when you're talking about how do we activate the right, you just have to look at them through the same lens and say, okay, well, you have there's more factions than any spectrum has,
Right.
right,
Multitude.
multitude. And if we take the right and we turn it into a triangle, you now have the surface area in between, and so you can basically get somebody with a bias somewhere except the left, right? So between the Christian feminine, the Marshall Max masculine, and the neutral libertarian, or it's really the ascendant male, the established, the dominant male, and the feminine, right? Cognitions, the three personality types. So, brothers, fathers, and women, right? So, so these functions are just a division of labor, right? I mean, it's division of labor, and and it shows up in personality and moral personality profiling, both in values, right? Perception of values. So if you look at it, you're going to say, well, I mean, of course, the Christians are going to be more empathic, and the conservatives are going to be more disagreeable. The libertarians are going to be more liberty oriented, and well, that's just because that's a biological distribution of what has to be, because humans are always distributed along this spectrum from male to masculine. We're worried about everything, to feminine, we worry about harm and care, right? That's all. I mean, what's really weird is they can't even conceive of loyalty, hierarchy, and order like we can. It's like we can conceive of them, we just wouldn't do it, right? But they can't even conceive of us. So, uh, uh, so in any event, I'm sorry if I'm overplaying this, but you gave me a great opportunity to tie together the fact that, of course, it's this way. But now that we've got a tool for understanding why it is, and it's a first principles tool for understanding why these groups are, now you can sort of say, okay, well, now I have the framework within which I know I can do something that isn't stupid or counterproductive, right? Because now you're saying I've got to measure all 3 points of the triangle in order to come up with any solution. So this goes back to your original problem of how do you get everybody to act together? And the answer is you have to have that criteria satisfied. It's very loose criteria, but I'm going to punish the fuckers and I'm going to hang them, right? I want this to be practical, and I want to feel good that we did the right thing.
Okay.
Right? If it's like satisfying the 3 market criteria.
Yes.
What's really weird is if I was in a discussion with you about your brand, right? If you were to you were a Fortune, 1000
Yeah.
company, we would talk about it in exactly these terms. We would just not in these sort of concepts, approaching the problem through this method. We just wouldn't use ternaryisms, right? We would use trying to functionalism and ternaryism. So anyway, so it's just what I'm saying is, well, I mean, I know this works because this is what marketers do every day, right? Right. The difference between marketers and the guys like Karl Rove is they can tell you in this block of 5 houses over here, in this particular zip code, at this particular point in time, their frame of mind is this, and so they need to hear this message. Well, I mean, marketers do the same thing. They do exactly the same thing. It's just, and we're essentially the problem of how do we market a solution that will activate those 3 groups? And the answer is, well, the marketers have money and we don't. The institutions have monopolized all the communication channels. So, and we haven't. So the question is, how do you get a message out to a bunch of people so that you can assist and bring about the feeling that you're moral, you're righteous, moral, and doing God's work. You're pragmatic, you're reciprocal, you're moral, and doing what's good for everyone. And you're moral, you're reciprocal, and you're punishing evil. Right? You have to look at finding that answer. So what everybody does is they talk about their point of view.
That's right.
And their point of view actually irritates the other points of the triangle.
That's because the issue is this: is that they're still on a civil footing and not on a wartime footing.
Well, they'll only go on a wartime footing. They'll only become an army when the cliff event happens.
Yeah.
And the left figured out during a couple of events during the Trump administration that that we got really close to triggering them. And so this is why I made a big deal about it in 2019. I said, Trump's going to lose the election. No one believed me. Trump's going to lose the election. Not nobody, but most people on the right didn't believe me. Trump's going to lose the election, and they're going to incrementally suppress us because that's how they work, through incrementalism. And so red flag laws and all this other shit, right? And then the canceling off social media, because it's how we were organizing. And we were successful. I mean, the alt-right was largely successful in creating an organizational movement using social media, because that was the time when we were able to capture an institution, a communication institution. And so that's why they shut it down. And I said, they're going to do that. Of course they did. That's the only reason John and I took the initiative we did. Was that we got to act now because we're not going to be able to act later. And then Musk comes along and does this, which certainly helped a lot.
So the interesting issue is the flip from a civil to a wartime footing creates an opportunity which didn't exist before, which I recognize some signals coming from Mr. Trump at this time, which I call moral inversion, which the behavior of the left, which is offensive to the people of the right, by governmental action, we regard with disgust.
Say that one more time.
The impositions of the government, which we regard as immoral on the right, by the left, using government as the tool, in a civil footing, we would never see ourselves doing that. And so because we are repelled by these actions.
We find it immoral. What they do is immoral.
Right. But it's like this. Once you recognize that is actually war, then it's okay and actually necessary to do the things that you find to be morally offensive in a civil setting with one another to the enemy in wartime.
Right. But, okay, so this is another marketing thing, right? You're right, but people don't work like that. if it has to be framed as words, it's right. You can give people words to frame what they want you to, but you can't give people a frame with words you want them to have. So what happens is you have to say to people, um, uh, you have to go to. I have an advertising example I use for this, but you have to tell Christians you are morally in the right to do this. You have to tell liberty, and it's God's work, because these people are
Yeah.
definitely are anti-God, right?
Huh.
So, don't get me started on the Gnostics being right thing, because I don't study this stuff, and now that I have a little bit, I'm like, oh fuck, they were right. Anyway, so then you go over to the conservatives, and you have to say, these people are evil and they need to be punished, and you're the ones who have to do it. You have to say those three messages, right? And if you say, you have to say them together, like you have to unify them, and therefore we're at war. And
Yes.
right, and so you can't take one. So when I say conservatives always get it wrong, what I mean is they try to take the immediate answer, the quickest, most easiest, most efficient solution to the direct solution of the problem. It's the same reason women get frustrated when talking to men, and men try to solve their problems, because that's the male frame, is
Yes.
solve the problem quickly and move on and get back to whatever, right? The thing is, the left is more like your nagging wife, right? They're water on a rock. They're sort of like how you nag me in the beginning. Sorry, I just saw that coming. I had to take advantage of it. Uh, and so this incrementalism is very effective against the male framework, specifically because we don't want to do anything until we have to. So my goal, or my argument, is you have to address all three points of the triangle, in which covers the surface area of the triangle.
Yes.
So everybody goes out and tries to say, who's this Charlie Curt guy is really successful, but I mean, he's a fucking moron. I think it's amazing to me, right?
What are you specifically referring to in that instance?
He's like the guy that went with Kanye to Trump, and Trump didn't know who Kanye was, and he turned in. So he's like this Christian nationalist, but
Okay.
he's really popular because America is still, I mean, the heartland is still majority Germanic, right? And so you take the Germanics and the Black Irish, or the Celtics, right? The Black Irish, which is the South, right? You've got the Protestants fucking universe down there, right? You've got the Protestant universe, and those people love to hear shit in God terms, right? I mean, I'm an Anglo New Englander. God is like the tax you pay to the peasantry for religion is the tax you pay to the peasantry for showing them that you respect them. It's not a thing you do, right? I'm just Catholic enough that I can sort of waddle my way back and forth without being I mean, if I was a proper Church of England person like the rest of my family, then I would just say, well, it's just we pat the peasants on the head, and this is how we show we love them, right? I mean, we support their God, right? I mean, it's just being respectful. All right, but I mean, you talk about Charlie Kirk. I mean, he's this dumb fucking kid that says amazingly stupid shit, but because he says it, activism in these terms, he's got a lot of young people. And so, you talked about, we bring up, there's a whole bunch of people in the middle here. It's like I don't know if this is not my thing, but you got a whole bunch of people in the middle there, right, that are all over the place. You get up to, I'm going to go up to Lindsay because he's the intellectual side of it, right? He's at the intellectual side.
Hmm.
Right? And then you go up to us, and we're in the scientific side and legal side. And like, there's they suppress everybody on the Marshall side, so we can't get the Marshall side out. So when you look at this, you're like, well, I mean, we've got this spectrum covered, right? But some of these people have really stupid ideas, right? So how do you give that group of people, each of who has an audience, a message that they can take to their audience? My favorite example that I use in advertising, I think it was the PlayStation, one of the PlayStation campaigns. I've given the talk so many times, but it's been long enough. It's been over 10 years now, so I've forgotten which exactly. But what they did is they produced a series of commercials for every type of gamer, like 6 types, right? And so, and I said that's how advertising needs to be done, right? You have to pay for more market targeted ads rather than try to get one ad that reaches everybody. Because when America was more unified, right, you could reach a lot of people on the triangle, right? When mostly what we sold was you too could join the middle class, right? Have consumption and entertainment and stuff, which is really with the basis of advertising from 1850 all the way up to the present, up until the 90s. And I said, and this was the talk I gave to the people, and the legal guys were there, and they're the ones that agree with me, and everybody else fought me. And I said, look, the future of advertising is going to be these micro campaigns, because you can't actually get out of the home run. Why? Because once everybody's got enough, you start collecting. You don't have the middle class identity you're searching for. You start collecting identities like they're fucking Magic the Gathering cards, right? I want this identity and that identity and that identity. And so you sort of go to your closet and you say, I have all these identities, right? And so you're dressing, you're acting, you're speaking in identities, right? So identitarianism was becoming a necessary component of achieving the next step of the Maslowian pyramid, which is that I need some way of status signaling when consumption is no longer sufficient.
That's right.
And when we're too different, right? So everybody's going for that. So I said, you have to go out you have to market to an identity. Well, it's the same problem in our case, right? You have to market to the identity. Now, if the politicians, they argue to ideological identities, right? I mean, they do their game, and it's mostly lying. The problem is we don't have the ability to lie, and we don't have the power to saturate the environment with messages. So we have to have something that people want to spread, right? They want to spread themselves. And the only way to do that, I think, is to produce market segmentation in order to reach everybody's audience, but show them how we act together.
So this
in other words, it's not, excuse me, let me finish. So the reason I made money is the reason I made money and built a top 25 marketing business is because I specialize in the complex value proposition. Wait. I don't even know why you're laughing at me.
I know.
Look,
I'm just making notes of what you said, sir.
The complex value proposition,
right?
And so that's why I have mostly this relationship with the big tech companies and the financial companies and places like that, and because they actually have fairly complex financial. It's not so much.
Yes.
They are so like selling a lot of some things. They're actually really fucking complicated. So when you try to sell a complicated thing like a fucking cell phone plan to citizens, you're always in this problem is that you as the agent of the company, between you as the consultant, between the company that wants to make money and the consumer is always trying to say to them, tell the fucking truth and don't make scams. But the marketing department is always trying to get approval from their boss by showing someone in that hierarchy is cunning enough to get an extra 0.1% by doing something which always amounts to a scam. Right? And this is what breaks customer trust. So you're always trying to get in there and say, okay, I know you think that, and I know you want that, and I know you want a career to move forward, but here's what's going to happen. And you're always right, and they never fucking listen to you. Right? The only people who listen, of my experience, and I'm going to always talk well about them, is T-Mobile. They actually give a shit about you. It's the only. Now you'll say, "Well, I hate T-Mobile." Well, I know all these companies, I mean, I know a lot about these companies. Some of these companies, I can tell you the data structure off the top of my head, right? Some of these companies, like AT&T, they live by fucking with you. Their whole strategy is baiting into hazard, and they're happy with rotation. In other words, there's a group of people who just move all the time, but every time I get somebody to join, as a marketer, I get a win. But the fact that they leave a year later to go to somewhere else doesn't show for me, right? But I got a win. So it's just this fucking circle jerk, right?
Yep.
Essentially. And where do you think all the money that these companies goes is to fund the circle jerk? So fucking irritating. Can't believe how irritating it is. So, and it's always these scams. So anyway, that's why I always promote T-Mobile. They were one of our biggest customers, and it was never a problem. It was never a problem. In other words, it was their thing was always create trust with the customer. They didn't say it this way. I can't remember how they said it. I wasn't the customer relationship manager. I just look at all the stuff every day. Whereas AT&T, I mean, it was fucking funny. And I've known some of these companies since before they were acquired, when cell phones were just coming around, right? I mean, they were smaller companies developing these cell phone networks, so they got all conglomerated, right? And back then, so me and I won't say his name, put a hack in the AT&T software so that he had a fucking free account for, like, I don't know, it was more than 10 years. We didn't get in trouble for it. I mean, I don't even think they, knew. It was just funny to me. I mean, I'm sure what happened was they did a software replacement or upgrade, and it just went away. But
All right.
you can't trust your own fucking people. Imagine what they do inside these companies. I mean,
Wait,
that's why, like, when Twitter says, we didn't, I'm like, you don't know what's in the code. Do you know which code there is? I mean, in my product, there's over 1 million lines of code.
Wow.
Right? Like, I don't know what's in that fucking library down there. I have no idea. Right? I mean, if you're the CEO, you're supposed to know what's in that library. Imagine
Can't be done.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on quite a bit of.
I'm going to tell you why I was
laugh
laughing.
at me again.
I'm going to tell you why I was laughing now.
Why?
Because it's like this: your impetuosity versus my impetuosity in this forum, which is,
I love it.
When you're impetuous and interrupt me, you say, "Excuse me, I want to finish," even though you just made that shit up in between when I started. And you just go on your own terror.
I know this game.
I'm not done. Please allow me to finish my argument here, which is when I interrupt because I'm being impetuous because I thought you were done and I falsely believed it to be true, I get in trouble with the audience and they bitch at me. And I have to put up with it. That's why I was laughing, because the cruel irony of it, Curt.
We all know this is going on. It's part of the comedy of you and I working together. I was with Martin the other day. Martin's very smart.
Yes.
Except that he's like still in his angry mode, right? I keep saying this, right? And so he came out and I disagreed with him on something. And I said, well, that's just you being you, right? And me being me, because it's where I am. And he says, he comes back with an absolutely correct response with, you want me to come back with it, and you would like it if I came back and agreed with you. And I'm like, exactly.
All good, man.
It's no agreement isn't valuable.
That's correct.
It just isn't valuable. It's only either you're additive or you're corrective. But agreement is like, I mean,
that's just air.
Yeah, and it's like the problem whenever somebody just agrees with me. I learned this is from how I was taught, by the way. I'll tell you that in a minute. But when somebody just agrees with me, I never know. I always have to decide whether is this like bullshit blowing smoke? Is this somebody who doesn't understand is just like saying me too? Or does this person actually understand what I'm saying?
It's virtue signaling, I think. lots
I
of the
mean,
time.
we have people that do that, and I know that, and I love them, right? I mean, it's not like they're just showing I'm happy to be part of this.
Right.
Right? That's not a problem. Right? The same thing on the negative side, right? I'm disagreeing with you. Well, are you disagreeing me to just a signal disapproval? Are you disagreeing with me because you want to show you're smart or something and you're not, right? Or you're disagreeing with me because I actually said something wrong, which happens pretty often if you notice how many fucking typos, grammatical mistakes, and sentence incompletions I make, right? I mean, it's I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you were right, right? Or when I'm actually wrong,
Oh my.
I just say, "Oh, I'm sorry," right? Most of the time, I misunderstand a person, right? And so I apologize immediately, right? But how do I know which one of those fucking things is happening, right? You don't.
That's right.
So with you guys, with the team, it's like having a management team, right? I don't want. It's not agreeing with me is it doesn't change anything, right? If I say I want to do this, do you agree or disagree?
Mm,
Right? So here's how I was taught. This is important because oh fuck, the medicine's taking effect. I feel a little better. I was taught art criticism. They would say, "What does that have to do
right.
with this?" And you understand, I was taught art criticism in a very deliberate. You can't do this anymore, right? You can't get this education anymore. But I was, well, you sit in a fucking circle and you criticize art for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in
Wow.
the afternoon, 4 days a week. All right. And so you go in and it's slide after slide after slide after slide after slide. Then student work, I think student work was first, and then it was examples. And you go through it. And you do not get to say anything waffly. In other words, you can't just say, "Oh, I like it." I mean, it's like basically giving yourself an F, right? Because you're not assisting the person. If you say, "I like how you handled this particular aspect of it," like I like your brushwork, or this one girl that was into modern dance, and she'd come in and do a fucking dance in the
Wow.
goddamn, which right, or do this dance as expression. She was fucking amazing. And once in a while her clothes would fall off, and we have, which
Oh,
she's just one of those, right? It's always this wispy girly shit going over. I mean, you can't not love her, right? I mean, but her clothes would fall off and you just keep going, right? you know? And it's just like, but you can't just sit there and say, "Oh, that was good," or "I like it." That's basically giving yourself an F.
right.
It's the same thing in meetings. I hate those fucking people who say, "Yeah, that's right." So fuck you, shut up. Right? Do you have, is there an opportunity I've missed? Is there an error I've made? Is there a consequence that I haven't shown? Now, here's where you find there are people who are really valuable. People who state absolutely irrelevant, obvious, possible failings as their method of Me Too.
Right.
And then there's people who actually think about it and say, "Have you thought of this?" Or "Could we do this instead?" Or "Could we do this in addition?" And when I run a staff meeting for delivery, which is people who are taking solutions to customers, I interrogate. It's like a fucking PhD committee. I
Yeah,
interrogate every relationship manager or project manager, whatever they are, whichever level this thing is. You have project administrator, project manager, relationship managers. You interrogate them, and all I'm asking is, I'm really trying to make sure, is the customer happy, right? Are we on time and budget? What problem? What problem are we solving? What people need to be brought in, right? What risks do we have? But more then I would say, what opportunities do you see? And I just drill until I know I've exhausted their knowledge. Same thing is, you're looking for it the other way. You're trying to pull in information you don't have. So I kind of, so to me, when we're sitting here talking, I'm just doing what I was trained to do, or with Martin, which is criticism, which is not, it's just falsification, right? Can I demonstrate by a positive or negative comment or series of positive that I actually know what you're doing? If I can't do that, then I can't trust your opinion. Does that make sense? Or here's an easy way. I like the way you solve this particular problem by this particular means. That shows you understand. Or I think you could have done this better, or I've seen this work before and it doesn't work out in the end, right? These are demonstrations that you're paying attention, that you understand what's going on, that you're competent. Whereas, oh, that's good, that's nice, whatever, I like it, the customer's going to be nice. Right. So I'm just doing what I was trained to do, which
Now, tell me this, how long would that class last 24 hours a week?
Oh, for 4 years. I was in art school for 5 years because I had to make up extra credits because I switched majors. So it's grueling, but you get very good at it. And I tell people, a lot of what you see in business or in philosophy, it's just applied art criticism. And the great thing about art is it's fucking unobvious. It's like people say, well, why did my first piece of serious philosophical work was a paper I wrote in undergraduate, which is on on the ways of measuring art. Well, of course, was doing it every fucking day. So I just tried to, how can I systematize the process of art criticism? So I like it when we play our little game here.
It's all right. I enjoy it too.
I don't know if that art is very useful. Hopefully,
it's useful to me. Okay. The interesting function now, going back to our prior arc of thought, which is related to this, the evidence that I have witnessed that we are changing status from a civil to a wartime footing with our opponents here, is Mr. Trump's recent statement this week, which he said, ballot harvesting is the way to win, which is like something that the right has not done and the left has been running hard with.
Well,
and that's Gesundheit.
The left innovates because they can't play the game by the rules.
So what's interesting in this context is they're doing research. The people on the right are doing research on what the ballot harvesting laws are, and they're going to do it. And they did this in one election, and I don't know the exact details. They did this where there was a plus 5% majority, at least perceived to be, for the left. That ballot, election was won by the Republicans when they ballot harvested, which is to say the ballot harvesting falsely creates the illusion of leftist supremacy.
Of course.
And so it's like this. It's like the talk now is that California will flip to the red.
Which I suspect if they do ballot harvesting, that would happen, yes.
Well, that's the plan at the moment. So they're taking up the leftist innovation in electioneering.
Yeah, it's a.
So that's the sign that we're moving. We are overcoming our moral aversion to such antics as we see on the left, which is to say that I call wartime footing. We're willing to accept what was previously morally unacceptable to us, and say instead of saying the left is bad, it's like, no, they're just innovative, and we're going to use it and hurt them. That's the plan.
Well, what happens over time is the right becomes the left becomes more left. So this is the process. That's the problem of it all. So I'm not going to disagree with that. This is a necessary. You have to fight a war on the enemy's terms, right? Not your own. In other words, you have to defeat them on your own terms.
That's right, on their terms.
Right. They have to recognize their defeat. So, you know, that in that sense, I agree. In the sense that there it's good for us to learn to abandon our I obey the rules in order to adopt the left's I don't obey the rules, then I don't like it. The consequence will be that the left will somehow work to establish legislation that neutralizes the advantage of ballot harvesting. I don't really know why. Yeah,
I would say that the issue is that the right taking up the ballot harvesting neutralizes the advantage given by for ballot harvesting in and of itself. And it's a reciprocal exchange.
I would believe that the rights continued preservation of the middle class and working downward into labor is because really what's happening is you're having a non-reproducing upper caste, right? And an outcast, bunch of outcasts against the productive classes. And the Republicans are going after the productive classes. If at some point that their Republicans are successful in doing that, and I think they're going to simply by repatriating industry, then I would suspect that there would be some chance to get sufficient political power to demonize these people of privilege, right? And unite the working middle and upper, basically upper middle classes. In other words, the people who are productive against the people who are unproductive. That said, I mean, at the rate of replacement, it doesn't look very good because it's not clear that the people coming in as replacement are capable of doing the same work that was possible for the people who are dying off. However, I suspect that those people that are coming in are happier to live at a lower standard of living than the people who are dying off. This again plays into the government's hands. So I worked for one of the research companies. I'd spend, a year on that problem and to try to popularize it as what it was, but I've not seen that come out. And I think it hasn't come out because people are afraid of publishing it. People are afraid to do the work. I mean, if you work in the academy, you can't do the work. If you work outside the academy, you got to find a way to fund it. Right. And if you fund it, then you risk anybody who funds you is risk being canceled indirectly. So,
yeah.
It's like, Steve Saylor's always doing his job there.
Okay.
And okay, the guy has amazing memory, by the way. I mean, he's been at it a long time, and he's been swimming in the sewer long enough that he's mastered the enemy's sort of tactics, and he does a pretty good job of commenting on these differences. But I just look at it as I don't see any evidence that other than Northern Europeans, most Europeans, are able to produce. In other words, nobody outside of with an ancestry outside of the Heinel line appears to be able to reliably integrate into Western high trust civilization. How much of that's genetic pacification? How much it's intergenerational indoctrination? I don't know. And how much of it's academic indoctrination? I understand the female problem really obviously, but I don't know, I can't separate these things. The data is pretty clear on how personalities and biases are natural, right? And how they self-select, but it's not clear. The trust issue is so important to Western civilization, and the preference for preservation virtue by not doing things that are seizing opportunities in order to maintain the commons. I don't say that's just like, that's antithetical to most civilizations. So, that's their problem, right? We defeat other civilization with commons. And I don't think it's funny, is like other civilizations don't even have a word for
it. Say no more.
Languages have no word for it. I don't know if it was Arabic or, yeah, it was Arabic. We talked about Arabic, how difficult it was to come up with the equivalent name, except it's like, it's, been in our civilization for as long as we know, right? In some form or another, right?
Well, I picked up I saw a meme that said this. It says, "I prefer civil war to communist government."
Yes.
And it's like, well, that I had not seen articulated until today. I think maybe yesterday. But it's like it's increasing consciousness of this is actually not a civil conflict.
What do you mean a civil conflict? This is actually not a civil conflict.
It's not civil, it's martial.
You mean a cultural conflict, I think. I don't know.
Well, it goes like this. It's like the leftist. I have many dear leftist friends and family members that would argue that it's merely a difference of opinion. And you would argue, no, sir, it's not. It's actually scientifically, validly, truthfully not. Your opinion is less valuable than mine in this context, because we're not talking about opinion. We're talking about representations of reality in your head. So they're that's not the right word, correspondent. Your opinions are non-correspondent, whereas mine are quite correspondent with reality. And that makes them not opinions.
They don't, if you have a social reality.
Yes.
And existential reality.
Yes.
Two worlds, yeah.
Right. So it's like this, but they're trying to impose their social reality on our real reality.
No, like you're always on this, right? This is one of your things. Like eventually nature makes you pay. You could pay the way the Chinese did, which is stagnation.
Yeah.
You could pay the way the Hindus did, which is stagnation and really serious fucking poverty. You could play it the way the Middle East did, which is going backwards for 1,000 years. Or you can play the way the Europeans did, which is out innovating the rest of the world combined. In just whatever few centuries, we can just detach ourselves from them, which is the Bronze Age Indo-European expansion, the Iron Age Mediterranean expansion, the Steel Age Atlantic expansion, and the Industrial Age world expansion. So I mean, you can look at those data and say, well, the farther you deviate from reality, the worse it gets for you. But they might say, and they will say, that's okay. I'd rather live simply, right? I'd rather live in this poorer, more equal state and have less adversarial competition than I would in this wealthier, unequal state or hierarchical state with continuous competition, opportunity, and innovation. Well, I mean, okay. what that'll happen, of course, is you're going to get three things. You're going to get the people who want that simplicity, in other words, they want to be serfs again, which is fine. We've run an experiment. It turns out that more people want to be serfs than you'd think, right? And I mean that in the sense that the majority of decisions other than consumption are made for you, right? You get to choose your consumption, your entertainment, essentially, right? Or your satisfaction, but what's required of you is determined by others. And there's some people that will choose what we call aristocracy or middle class or class mobility, whatever. And we like competition. It's fun. Working with other people to compete against other people is just a sport for us. We find it entertaining. And moreover, I don't want people to make decisions for me, right? This is a conservative. I don't want people. I'll do my stuff. I'll do my duty. And I want you to fucking leave me alone. Right? Right? Those people, that's group of people. What'll happen is you're going to get the novelty seekers. These people currently move to cities. And they're hyper consumptive, right? They're all the talking public, all these outwardly facing people that engage in all this social entertainment, but they don't breed very much, right? And so those people will collapse because they can't build. They're based on a consumption economy that's no longer possible. So that's fine. Let them do that. They'll turn into favelas, right? Right. And so we'll return to the world order, which used to be at the civilizational level, but now it'll be the local or regional level. We'll just return to that level over time. And then, of course, what'll happen is the people who are capable will move into the conservative region because we'll just outlaw more behaviors than the leftist region will. They'll provide less outlawing behavior, in other words, less adaptation and more equality for lower productivity and lower expenditures. But we'll still produce all the high quality shit here, and they can get the benefits of it through trade, if even at less. And then we'll export defects to them, and they'll import opportunities to us, and candidates to us. But there will always be, and the most privileged people in this position will be the elites over the peasantry. That's a reciprocal relationship. I'll take responsibility for telling you what to do, organizing and making all these decisions, and your decisions are limited to consumption. There's a lot of people who want to live in the parent-child relationship scenario. There's a lot of us who don't. We want to live in the peerage, right? And so, or the hierarchy. We'll live in it. So we just need to let people do what they want, and it'll be fine, right? I don't see why it isn't. Evolution will take its course.
That was nice. That was more than I expected, though. But that's okay.
So far,
what's that?
Your questions are good today. It was good stuff.
Yeah, we're on the right page, and it's like watching the development of the evolution of the social situation, socio-political situation. I think all the signals are actually right good, even though I think it has to get worse. And this disaster in eastern Ohio this week, this train wreck, and the EPA's mismanagement of it, if it was mismanagement, but it's just dreadful.
All our institutions that are supposed to be in the business of insurance, right, which is what the government usually does, is insurer of last resort. Every insurer of last resort is failing. The only ones we have left that aren't failing is the Supreme Court, thanks to almost exclusively to a bunch of independent people who formed the Federalist Society voluntarily. Right? They voluntarily formed it and decided that they were going to try to fix the law. Right? This happened quite a while ago. Right? And then the other institution that hasn't yet failed is the military. It's possible the military will fail.
I suppose. Well,
I mean, you can't send. Our military does a lot of things right, and if the disaster my favorite whipping boy is FEMA, which is a waste of fucking time, energy, money, and it's a waste of 4 letters even. When that's an easily solvable problem under military direction. It's the same thing with the CDC and the WHO. WHO is bought by China, and the CDC has demonstrated it's incompetent. So FEMA's demonstrated it. It's incompetent. With certain, I mean, look what they've done. They've done nothing in Fort Myers. That's all people, individual citizens fixing that place, right? Say, look at Katrina, right? We got this stuff because of hurricanes, and they still are. They're useless. Why? Because they have people to administrate and have no resources. They have no money, and they have no competency, right? And so everything's still done at the local level, local and state level. The only thing they can do is FEMA can do is give them money. We don't need FEMA for that. We need Congress. What did you the who's responsible for the rail car? EPA. The EPA's clearly failed, right? Because their job is the insurer of last resort. We need less regulation, more insurance.
I'm like, this is like my take on it now is this is we need to do what I originally, when I learned of this in 1997, which was asset forfeiture.
Yeah.
I'm like, I suspect Norfolk Southern as have been involved in a crime, and I'm going to take the entire $55 billion organization as we think it was involved in a crime. We're going to forfeit it to somebody that's not that organization. Because
the problem is we're not also punishing the organization that's the insurer. Whereas if
we haven't got there yet.
Okay,
no, we haven't. But
You're
it's
right.
like
I jumped ahead. I did the thing Brandon does to me all the time. Sorry.
But you're right. And I'm like, I would agree with that premise. And we should. And it's like, I don't mind taking EPA too. It's criminal. We think your assets were involved in a criminality. And we're taking them all. And it's a militant response.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we can do that.
I know, but I haven't tried, so therefore it hasn't been tested. It needs to be tested.
Well, the thing, so here's the thing that I like, right? There are things that break the corporate, pierce the corporate veil.
Yes.
And so there are certain things that you just cannot do as a board. A board member and the management team are directly liable for. And it's oddly enough, those things don't happen.
How about that? That's odd. We're not crossing that crazy line.
Well, it's also that there are things that happen in companies, specifically finance companies, where there's a whole chain which a financial instrument travels through, right? A whole fucking pathway, right? But the point is somebody from one of the major banks was talking to me back in 2008. The people I work with only know this piece. They actually don't understand this.
The chain.
Right. But if you said, well, so let's say I'm a CEO today. I have to know, or the CFO, I have to know all this financial stuff about my company. The problem is I probably can't know it. Right. But I'm still liable.
That sucks.
Right. And so you have all these auditors and whatever come in. And so what you're really trying to do is saying, I can't know, but I need to pay enough people to make who can know, so that they can tell me I can say this, I can attest to this. It's still a trust problem. Well, the same thing happens if a bank originates a consumer loan, why is it they can sell it? Right? They might be able to sell. I would say you can sell a share of stock in the loan, right? And that's how I get the recovery.
Yeah.
But I still own it. Right. In other words, the title isn't transferable. That changes now add on top of that. Okay. Anybody who touched this fucking thing, right? It doesn't matter if you're a goddamn 30K year clerk, right? You're liable if you, right, in the chain. That's how things stop happening. Right.
That's right. Everybody has skin in the game.
Right. You got to get as many people to have skin in the game as possible. And then once that happens, all of a sudden you don't have somebody brought in thrown in a job where they have to learn on the job because it's too freaking dangerous for you. What
Yes.
you do instead is you have to train people to do a job, right? And there are plenty of jobs where human discretion is involved. You have to separate those jobs where discretion is involved from where judgment's involved. In other words, there's a difference, right?
Yes.
I can make a decision based on this criteria, given the criteria available, and then I have this question. There's not enough information possible to have to make this judgment, but from my experience, I can make this.
Right.
I can use my discretion. So you have to, if we just increase liability, a lot of this stuff would go away. Because the problem is too many people have plausible deniability, which is really why where baiting into hazard comes from. If you have plausible deniability and you have baiting into hazard, then all this shit happens. You know, if you have the ability to not tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and you can say it in funny language. If you have plausible deniability, you have baiting into hazard, right? Now you've got the inability to demand liability, but that's just an incentive problem. Right? You've created an incentive. You created a malincentive problem. Well, that's what's creating all this financial crap, right? It's the same thing as creating the problem in the administration, in the academy. I mean, it's just purely left-wing propaganda, and to get a PhD, get on not a PhD, a tenure committee, right? To pass tenure, you've got to have done all this left-wing activism. It's not right. You've got to publish. You've got to do an activism. It's not about that you're a master of the master of the field and its absence of deviation from the hierarchy and natural laws of the universe, right? And how well you are communicating this. It means you've got tenure because you worked a political agenda to undermine the Constitution of the United States and the traditions of the Western civilization. So, I mean, the academy is the enemy of. First of all, it's extractive. It's just a priesthood, right? Like you don't need. The reason you need a diploma is because we give out too many diplomas. Does that make sense? It's not because the diploma you actually learn anything.
Inflationary,
right? And so now I spend $80,000 to $100,000 on an education, if at an ordinary state school, right? That's not even a private school; it's a state school.
Education,
and it's an education. And now what's happened is I can't afford to have children and put a down payment on a house. But I've got to work that debt. So I've got to get into my 30s. So I've lost my 20s. Well, I've worked on this problem a lot, and it's like the thing is I don't want to believe. I don't want to admit. It's like one of those things you tease me about all the time, right? I mean,
oh no, here we go.
I'm a fucking idiot, right? Well, it's because I can't stand the truth bothers me, but I'm living in denial of it until I've exhausted every. If I can find a way out of this, I'm going to find it, but I can't find. The answer is you have your fucking kids either during college or before college, right? And then have college and your job. And we should let people fund that shit, right? Just fine. Why? Because that's what we actually need, right? It actually reverses all the malincentives that produce all the dysfunction. I mean,
we're in agreement.
It's just
my assessment is this: it's the problem is grant seekers and grant givers.
Yes,
that's all.
Well, it's like I said this yesterday. I'm like, what did Elon say? He says, well, he said, the journalists used to go out to report and tell the truth and share information, but now they're just that's just an excuse for activism. Well, of course, it's true. I've really never met excuse me. I know one journalist. I've met a lot of them. I know one journalist, and he does the police beat. Right? Yep. Is he really a journalist, or is he a record publisher?
It sounds like a record publisher.
He's a record publisher. So he interviews the police, right, and works the police beat. So his whole job is to make sure the paper has
a record.
Publishes these records, and he writes stories on particular crimes that happened, and we all want to know that stuff because it's first of all fascinating to us because we're human. The second of all, it lets you say, well, this is out of hand, or this isn't out of hand, or if this is the only thing that's happening in our town, wow, it's like those fucking Satanists that killed their whole parents in the town next to mine when I was living in rural Washington. And it's like, yeah, how the F does that happen way the F out here? Right?
Wait, I have to repeat the story about my uncle, because he studied this for the audience. My uncle worked with multiple personality people, and he found out that they were, I asked him the question when he was nearing his death, and it was, there's two stories about this. One, which is believed by many, which is this is implantation in the heads of vulnerable people by psychological workers, by hypnotic suggestion, that there is no satanic, that they called it satanic panic. Mm-hmm. And I said, and the other story is they're victims of ritual satanic abuse. And I said, which is it, Uncle? Since I know you know the answer. And he says, in every community, there is a church like this, organized on those principles. And I was chilled. There you have it. So it's like, it's that it surfaces is unusual, which is telling of the unusual times in which we live, that the Church of Satan, which is based in Boston, I would give you their address because I know it, but I don't know it off the top of my head. They are attempting to form a ritual abortion clinic in New Mexico at this time. So open satanic abuse. And it's like, okay, this is a challenge to the good Christians. Have you had enough of this moral, I don't even know what to call it. It's such perversity. There you have it.
Funny, yes, thank you. There's a comedian that I watched do a skit the other day. I've never heard of the guy before, but I think he might, I can't remember what he's non-Western. He's either from India or some borderland, that space between the Middle East and India, right? Somewhere in there. And he says, Christianity is great because you can come here and you can say what your religion is, and everybody goes, oh, that's cool. And they go on. But go that in any else part, where else in the world, and they'll try to kill you or ostracize you. And I'm like, that's the benefit, that's the good and bad of Christianity.
That's right.
Christians are too tolerant of the bad things.
To a point.
We still need some more Albigensian crusades. I'm all for that.
Was a historical reference that will go over many heads.
The Albigensians were, this better than I do, but they basically were a pretty popular heresy, and I believe southern France and
yes,
southern France, and that lasted for quite a while. That basically ended up being a threat to the church, like Protestantism was. So can you explain? You know more about this than I do. So
they essentially did a crusade against them.
Yeah, but what was the thing?
I don't know the basic nature of the heresy.
Well, sort of like how they got rid of the Gnostics, right? And they burned all their books. Right?
Just they got to be got rid of their. The church did this a number of times. There's different groups that were, just accused of various heresies, and it's like it's not very common, but they did it, and then they went after all the people that were doing it, and they would do bad things to them, like burn them at the stake or something like that. I mean, it was rough. And they got rid of them because it's like the church maintained its control, and it's like that would be the militant church limiting the behavior of the parishioners.
Yes.
Violently.
I'm not so worried about Christian sects that because they don't seem to. What varies among Christian sects seems like a lot to them, but from an outside, from in the sense of the scope of world religions, it's noise, not signal.
Right.
It doesn't make any difference because the underlying teaching of Jesus and your relation to the world is stupidly simple. A lot of stuff to teach you a very simple idea. right, in a lot of contexts, right? But it's a very simple idea, which is just, it's the problem with Christianity is, like I said, you go anywhere else in the world and it's a problem because it's basically a statement of disloyalty if you have a different religion. Whereas among Christians, it's like, this is what we do, right? So anyway, there's a Christianity is marginally indifferent in their sex. Now I'm not going to sex or sects.
That's a sect.
I gotta put that. I have sniffles, so I can't say my T because it requires air come out your nose.
Just for clarity,
Just for
I will
clarity.
spell it for the
Although
lovely
my
audience.
understanding is a lot of these Protestant evangelical priests get a lot of P. Pussy is my understanding. I don't know this. And
it's just a rumor at this point.
yeah,
That
I'm
I
kind of
haven't
thinking it's
tried
not a
being one of
rumor.
those guys.
So if that's the case, I'm going to become a preacher
It's
tomorrow.
certainly worthy of investigation, I must say. That's the rumor that I hear. The rumor that I hear is like, so you forgive the errant women for their misbehavior in the church. Everything's going to be fine.
I forgot what
it's abating into hazard. It's okay.
You just get a grin on your face, and I feel like I gotta say something not off the wall. It's just incentives. So what were we just talking about?
We were talking about the excessive tolerance of the Christians. Yeah,
is that there's some. I've said this all the time. Christian sects, basically sects.
Thank you.
Christian denominations. Is that the same?
That works better.
Denominations. I can say that. Christian denominations basically cover the IQ spectrum, and the IQ is different in every. The average IQ is different. There's a lot of crossover, right? But in general, and at the bottom, there's where all the really, it's only this way and this way, and these people are crazy. But what's the real difference between them and this guy over here who's, agnostic, raised in the Christian or United Church, right? What's the difference? Well, it's the language they use, behavior, the moral condition is the same, right? The problem is very few religions are compatible. I'd say only Buddhism is compatible with Western natural rule of law. You really have Christianity for the feminine, Buddhism for the neutral, and you have Stoicism for which is what you're a very Stoic Christian.
Thank you, sir.
For the people at the top, and then there's the people who are out there in the Nietzschean ancestral world, who consider themselves how do you say it? They don't consider themselves Christian, but they don't realize that what Christianity was just an excuse for the application of Arianism for some better cause other than self-interest. Oh, I'm not. That's not original. That's been said through many times. I can't remember who I got it from. I probably got it from Durant. But Christianity is just an excuse for Arianism. In other words, it gave European aristocracy a justification for conquest. In other words, they could say they were appealing to higher power. Same thing.
Which is good. It convinces the masses to go along with you.
I mean, like I said, most people operate under a moral pretense. Now there's some people who defend just because it's necessary, but expansion is generally for self-interested criminal means or for what they consider moral justification. I mean, oh my God, I'm so much better off than I was earlier. Dying earlier.
Yep.
We need an Albigensian crusade or
But no, so it's interesting. It's like if the Satanists are coming out and saying they're going to do this, and the Christians are going to allow this, it's like, wow. It's like I don't see how you cannot become a militant Christian in the face of this, because the flood is coming if you allow this to occur.
Well, I mean, that I don't, Christians, I always see it as they're trying to excuse doing nothing, but they're trying to make an excuse for doing nothing. But my problem with it's not always. I'm not talking about the guys who are really Christian and really American, right? In other words, they're Americans, they're Christian, they're rule of law and martial, right?
They're American Christians.
I mean, you got to put it in three places.
Okay.
American means legal, martial means martial, and Christian means Christian. So
yes.
I always say you want a classical liberal, which is a martial rule of law Christian, which is upper, middle, and lower classes. You want all those three things, right? And that equilibrium is what's great. You should be a soldier in times of war, a citizen in times of peace, and a Christian in interpersonal relations.
Cincinnatus, Cincinnatus.
It's not fucking. It's like everybody knows this stuff. It's just not written down as a canon somewhere that can't be abused, right? Which is what we're doing.
One project at a time, Curt.
So if you have under trifunctionalism, if you have martial duty, natural law duty, and Christian duty, you've got the freaking spectrum covered, right? And the problem, of course, is that it's harder for us to unite people toward a common cause than is monopoly civilizations. The difference is, because we're this way, we can give soldiers, we give everybody initiative and they will seize it because they're used to taking initiative on their terms. So that's why you don't want to fight your Europeans, is because everybody else needs to be told, and Europeans just take initiative, which is why the Ukrainians are we're taught. And that's why they're fighting like hell, because in our world, sergeants run the army, right? I mean, it's the guy, everybody else's job is basically supplies. And,
yes.
and nobody else has that because you can't trust the guy down there. That's the real problem in the rest of the world. Japanese could do it because they're the same as us. But I mean, it's like the Arabs can't hold an army together except at a parade. I mean, it's, don't get me started. Initiative is what matters. That's so trifunctionalism. We don't think of it that way.
It's responsibility, right?
It provides, creates a world of this world of self-determination, which creates a world of initiative. And this initiative shows up in battlefield. And battlefield is what you and I always talk about as the OODA loop, which is seizure of initiative to outwit the enemy and in his thinking and communications. That was a pretty good arc, yes.
Little loop. That arc was just wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know, Curt.
I forgot what your topic was because it was so good. It was so good.
It just goes back to this the recognition that we have to be able to function as at wartime because we have enemies, and we are I think that guys like Jordan Peterson, are refusing to admit the premise that we may be at war and not in a civil discourse with people who are not our enemies, when they are in fact our enemies.
Well, if you and I are successful, and you and I are the team, not just you and I, but the team, you, I, and the team, if we're successful, and we are accumulating talent. I mean, unfortunately, there's a bunch of guys who can't publicly participate. I mean, it's just, we don't need about a dozen of us who are at my Contrafabian, Martin, Luke's level. I mean, there's some other guys I won't mention right there. certainly more of them I could recite. Let's see what it doesn't matter. I don't, every time I make a list, if I can't, it's like I only want to include the people who want to be included, right? And so I'm never really sure who to list, because and then I feel like I've offended somebody I didn't include, but I'm like, I'm not sure if you want me to include you or
Can't win, man.
you can't win. So it's like I'd rather say that I just say the people. So, but if you have those people, you know, as a group, we're basically a Supreme Court. I mean, it's pretty hard to get something over, you know, on us. And shit, what was I lost my train of thought because of that. So you were saying that. What was the last thing?
We have enough.
Oh, it's the problem, the core problem, right? Is that war is that the concept, just like the concept of criminality of the female is unintuitive to us, the concept of the female as warfare is counterintuitive to us. When you hear people, and this is one of our primary insights that we try to explain to people, is the idea of oneness is a very masculine view of the world. So whenever you hear people talking about politics, you talk about we, but there is no we anymore, because the minute you separate, you get women into the position where they're have the same amount of sovereignty and freedom as men, because they're now free from the burden
limits.
Right? So now what you have is you have the war between the sexes played out, and you have the Jews as the head of the female method, you have the Europeans as the head of the masculine method, and so what you have is this internal conflict. So we don't, you and I or our team, we don't see the world as everyone is the same. We see the world as a spectrum of the male, female, always in adversarial or competitive or cooperative relation to one another. And so we see this happening. And so when the minute you do that, you're automatically forced out of the ability to say, well, everyone. You're always stuck with some part of the distribution. Right, you're always stuck with talking about things as a spectrum, which is really what we teach, right? Serialization, disambiguation by operation, serialization, by enumeration, operationalization, and serialization. And so we're trying to teach people to think in the series, because this is like the error of ideal types, which you see in sophistry and philosophy. And we're just talking. It's the same thing with the Enlightenment of everyone's equal, except we're not. And it's worse in the modernity when women are an opposing force to men. And so now you're in this position of saying, okay, now I have to think about the world as this masculine-female competition in all things. And so we just need to outlaw the female antisocial behavior. We need to outlaw female warfare, the same way we've essentially outlawed male antisocial behavior in female, and treat them with the same level of severity. Now, the problem is we're not going to like that, because female behavior is seditious, and they have less agency than men because there's less risk. So we have to increase the risk to women of their sedition and antisociality, which is undermining, basically, gossiping, shaming, rallying, undermining, sedition, treason. And the way we've outlawed, male antisocial behavior, which is violence, theft, in war, violence, theft, violence. I want to scale that somehow. And war, we have to get equally suppress the social warfare as we have the physical warfare, physical and political warfare. The verbal and social warfare versus the physical and political warfare. We have to equally suppress both ends. If that happens, of course, then we're back we're forced back into the natural law, forcing us to engage in trades. The problem is that people think people lived in a world long enough where they can get away with this stuff, that they think it's a right. Like, we have a right to be heard. You have a right to speak. You don't have a right to be heard. As a matter of fact, I have a right to not listen to you. You don't have the right to my attention. You don't at all. And so all this crap that comes out of women, which is basically sedition, and I don't mean just women, I mean the female mind, right?
Feminine. Thank you.
Feminine mind. I knew it. I was like, oh, I slipped. He's going to correct me.
He's gonna get me.
Feminine mind. We have to outlaw the antisocial behavior of the feminine mind. And for women, that's like, you mean I got to put a cork in my mouth? I mean, just it's one thing for us to not punch each other. Well, the risk is pretty high, but women, they've been getting away with gossiping, shaming, rallying, undermining for a century, the better part of a century now. They don't want to stop lying, cheating, and fabricating, and undermining, and gossiping, and shaming, and whatever. They don't see it as, they'll say, well, your words are violence. In other words, truth is violence. They'll say, so is your shaming, rallying, undermining, gossiping, psychologizing.
The issue is their paymasters are paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have, it's a form of thievery that they are taking advantage of for the purposes of our enemy.
Yep.
They're the foot soldiers of the enemy, and it's like, okay.
So I want to solve. I feel so much better. So the problem is, like, I took two, what are these things called? Diphenhydramine.
Okay.
And Zyrtec, because I'm out of Zyrtec, but it tends to make me stupid. So, because I want to just.
Zyrtec does?
No, Zyrtec is, I can't. I've been taking Zyrtec so many, basically taking Zyrtec for decades since it came out, right? So, because the only thing that works, but diphenhydramine is a good backup. Problem is, it makes me cuddly and soft and sleepy.
Take a nap.
I want to take a nap. So, I want to close on your issue of we're at war. How do you get everybody to understand?
Yep.
How do you get everybody to grasp that we're at war on their terms? Does that make sense?
Wait, on who's there?
On the
enemy's terms?
Right. No.
Or within the terms of our factions.
Within the terms of our factions. They have to understand.
Yep. That's right.
And to do that, you have to give a solution that's acceptable to everyone. Now, let me ask a stupid question. I have no fucking idea what the answer is. Now, I would say that any religion other than an ancestral religion of Europeans, which would be there's no classical religion left. There's classical philosophy left, sure. Classical religion left. There are some of us who are sort of biased toward the Germanic religion. In other words, the more warrior religion of the Germanics, yes, and that's definitely my warm fuzzy place. Because I don't think in terms of sand dunes. I think in terms of the Black Forest, right? It's sort of my universe. And then there's so we have the philosophical humanist view, we have the Germanic, we have the Christian, right? Just feminine, masculine, neutral. It's fucking obvious, right? That we would retain 3 points of the compass in religious affiliation under trifunctionalism. So why don't we make European religions, especially list them? These are our natural religions, and so these are the religions. These are the state religions, and any other religion is merely tolerated. How would Christians react to that?
I don't know. I don't think they would react.
Would they have a negative opinion of it or a positive of it?
I think they would point to some scripture and say something that would be non-committal.
Yeah. Because it's one thing between the difference is that the state shall not have a state religion doesn't mean the state can't prohibit a religion, right? It certainly can. So because, and then you can establish what a religion consists of. So my view is that has to happen.
I think so.
Hard to argue with. See, the thing is, people say, well, what about Buddhism? I mean, Western Buddhism is secular humanism with meditation. So, I mean, and the Buddhists all say that. It's not like I'm fucking some genius here that's thought that up. It's like, first of all, it's the Buddhists who said so. And secondly, it's fucking obvious, right? I mean, it's just, personally, I prefer Christianity and naps, but hey, but you know, if it works for you, it works for you. Anyway, what's the other one? So we have to reach all these people. Now, libertarians are easiest for me to understand because, you know, they're going to be interested in rule of law and economic policy and that kind of stuff. And they're at best 10% of the population.
Right.
And then there's the conservatives, which, you know, it's pretty easy to satisfy the conservative Marshall requirement.
Yeah.
Now,
the issue is they require permissions from other classes in order to begin to do their operations.
I think that's one of the sales. Is you have to get the Christians to say and the libertarians to say, okay.
Like this,
conservatives
loose the hounds.
Yep. Because, and they would just, conservatives, I mean, at least the people I know, they will happily, you know, do the pointy objects. And I'm talking about just ordinary moms, ordinary dads at this point. Right. And then you hear all this bravado from the left, and I'm like, you guys fold, right? Easily.
Right. I think when they require permissions. Okay, the marshals.
Say that again.
It's like this: the marshals require permissions. Okay, because their behaviors are outlawed under our system. And so it's like this. It's like if you look at martial behavior exists on a spectrum too, from nonviolent social interactions of an organized nature to warfare. And so you can engage them on the nonviolent social interaction, socioeconomic, political interactions of a martial nature, which is organized action as a group on that spectrum to this point that the does not generate negative impulses or inhibitory impulses by the libertarians or the religious types. And that's acceptable, and that's how you do it. You organize them on that which is permissible at this time by these people on our side that is recognized as legitimate and acceptable behaviors, and then mobilize them in that manner incrementally.
Moral license, set of demands, a means of trends.
I didn't catch that last one.
It's just something I wrote back in, I don't know, 2009 or 10. I said, in order to do this, you need a moral license, a set of demands, a plan of transition. What's my fourth one? My brain is gone.
It's okay. It's slow enough that I can write it down. Okay, there's a fourth one.
Moral license. Set of demands. Here it is. The moral license, a set of demands, an actionable and implementable. An actionable and implementable solution that will fix the problem, a strategy for rapid victory, and a believable threat of consequences if negotiations fail.
There you go. That's sufficient.
It's from a criticism. Somebody said to me, says, I don't think they understand. The complaint isn't that your posts are word salad. It's that you never make a point. Oh, you don't understand is if I make the point, I go away. I have to imply things because stating them too openly is too dangerous. I mean, it's not.
I understand that
It's
one.
not it. So they don't understand that. They don't understand that I am the method to the madness. I mean, the reason I survived for so long is because you have to read a series of things, right, and to get it rather than one thing to get it. All right. So what else? You got anything else on your list there?
My list, that was pretty exhaustive, Curt. I thought that I came up with a pretty good list this week.
You did an awesome job.
And it was quite an interesting conversation, and I think very productive, and for me at least. And I made many notes, and I want to introduce this episode since we can. We've been going about 2 hours. This is episode 230208. And I want everyone to hit like and subscribe and the notification bell to leave some nice messages for us, and also to check the Natural Law Institute website for how they can donate and be productive and help everybody out just a little bit, develop the commons. It's wonderful. Does that work for you, Curt?
Every time we talk, it works for me, Brad, because you're amazing.
You're very kind. It's
All
all
right.
right.
Have we done today's job? Do we have anything else?
I think we can go off camera.
Okay. Thanks everybody for watching. Stop recording.